Hello, guys. Welcome back to a new episode of Teen Talks. Today we have Patty. She is a true creative powerhouse in the world of design and branding. With over 15 years of experience, Patty is a corporate identity designer and brand strategist who turns brand ideas into visually stunning realities. She runs her design studio in New York City, helping brands to connect with people in ways that really matter. Welcome, Patty.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, um, just start off, can you tell us about your journey into the world of design and what inspired you to start your studio in New York?
Yes. Okay. So I guess it would have started pinpointing maybe around high school. I started taking photography seriously in high school, and I was like on the newspaper, I was in the yearbook, and I thought that's the route I was going to go. And when I went to apply for college, my parents were not very happy about me wanting to go to Miami to a photography school. So that got delayed, and I just went to general school, college for 2 years. And then I transferred into the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill into their journalism school. And in the journalism school, they had a visual communications degree, which is what I was doing. And within that had the photography. So I was back into photography, which I was thrilled about. But they also had design classes. And at the time it was called multimedia. Now it's just like new media. You know, it's back when you were first putting audio and video and everything together to tell stories. So my background really has always been in the storytelling and in visual storytelling. So I guess that's where it started.
And just asking, what was your biggest challenges in branding, of course, in this industry?
In this industry. Okay, so in branding, it was kind of maybe moving into it was a challenge because my heavy background straight after school was in photography. It was in photojournalism. So I moved to New York to be a photo editor, and then through many years of working in photojournalism, I slowly decided to, I started having children, and I decided to step back from photojournalism because I was working with mostly conflict photographers, pretty heavy topics. I grew up in the military, so I knew all about war, all the way through. So I was like, I didn't really want to be around that content while I was raising little kids. So I just drew from all my experience, and I worked with photographers by myself. And slowly that became very clear that the photographers needed help marketing themselves. And I was already doing some of that when I worked at Getty Images as a photo editor, helping market them to get jobs and meet with clients. So it was kind of a natural progression. And then to market them, they needed a website. So I started building websites for them and helping them design. And then it moved away from just photographers and into small businesses. So it was kind of a natural flow out of the need of what clients needed and the skills that I had. Since I had such a breadth of skills, I was happy to just do whatever they needed. And I found what was cool about that was it worked different parts of my brain. So you could overlap projects. You could do more of a website build for a client, and then you could start doing marketing material for a client, and they didn't really conflict because it was using different parts of my brain. So I could be very efficient and work very quickly.
So would you say that this step down from more conflict types of photography was a good thing for you, or just like a setback?
No, I think stepping down was a good thing. I think starting your own business and freelancing, it was really understanding how to be a business. It did seem like a natural progression, but I don't know that you're ever finished learning from that. I'm still constantly pivoting my business, trying to niche down, trying to improve the visuals. It kind of never stops, but I think that is a challenge. I think the sales and marketing and networking is like a huge challenge when you're working especially as a designer or creative, because your main thing is being creative. And usually that doesn't always mean that you're a good salesperson. So if you want to continue, I was really lucky. I got a lot of work, word of mouth, which is a great part of networking and people knowing what you do. But you still need to continue that sales process, which wasn't so natural for me. So I'm still trying to master that.
So for me, like, especially like in the project, one of the hardest things to do is to start it, right? So
Yeah, true.
yeah, so how do you approach creating a new brand identity from scratch? Like, what's your progress like from initial concept to final execution?
Yes. So usually it's with a client. But I do have to say I do make stuff up sometimes when I have a downtime or I'm just curious about a new technology, a new website platform or something like that. I always believe in just doing it. Just make up a project and just do it. So you learn the software quickly or you learn the mistakes. So when you do have a client, but when I have a client, usually it starts with conversations. It's just like this. We just have a conversation. We call them a discovery call. There's different levels of it, depending on who you are and how you work. But I just start asking a lot of questions and trying to understand their business. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? What is their mission? What are their values? Are there things they like visually? Are there things they don't like visually? What are the examples of things online that they like and companies they like and ones they want to stay away from? And then I go into big time research, and I usually spend 2 or 3 weeks researching. And that collectively, I, in the background, tend to start doing sketches at that time, usually if I get inspired by things. And then I work through the sketches and I come back to them and present the research that I've discovered, the direction that I'm going to go in, and give them like 3 concepts that are different. And then we have a conversation about that. They pick a lane, which way they like. Sometimes, most of the time, it's mixing and matching the different ideas together. And then I go back and then I start working on finalizing. And it's usually 2 or 3 rounds or so of doing the actual logo and bringing in the idea of the fonts and colors and things like that. I think one challenging thing would be my favorite way to work is to have a story out of the logos. So I talk to them a lot about, like, why are we picking these colors? Are they the appropriate colors for your business and your competition and your positioning in the market? What do the fonts say? Are you using thin fonts, which, typically evoke like luxury and like that? Or are you trying to be more approachable? So is it a different kind of font? So we have these conversations, and sometimes they go really well and sometimes they're a little tricky. Like, people will say, well, I really like this, and if I feel like that's not the direction that is going to best serve them, I have to find a way to have that conversation with them about, well, maybe it's not the best positioning for you, and these are the reasons why. And then, a lot of times I'm able to convince them, but sometimes people just want what they want. And then, you have to respect their client when they're paying.
You really like to to connect to the company's vision, right? To understand what they want.
Absolutely. I think so. One thing that I've just recently found out, I just spent 4 days in a brand builders summit. So it was like 4 days of all these designers giving all this information via presentations and online talks. And I attended one where it was this guy who was a brand strategist, and he wasn't a designer. He was a brand strategist. And that kind of was like, oh, this is very clear to me that I don't want to do the strategy as in like a big corporate company where you have to go and do research on like interviews with clients and things like that and like really dial down what the business strategy is. I want to slip in there when they're ready to start doing the brand identity and work with that strategy that's already in place. A lot of my clients are not doing that front end work. That's the ideal scenario. When a company has the money and they're paying somebody to like help them hone that down, or they can hand you their brand strategy, then you can build from that. But most of my clients don't have that. So I do have to go through this process of like a mini strategy at the beginning. And that's where I use the idea of storytelling. And if they really they're really not sure what their tone is, what their voice is, we start talking about characters and brand archetypes, because everybody can really relate to storytelling and characteristics of the hero or the sage, or, there's like 12 of them. And, just kind of start talking about, well, what characteristics do you want your company to be, not you? Sometimes that's tricky, especially when it's a personal brand. And it's even tricky for me. Like, what is my voice as a company versus Pattie McNab, the mom, the wife, the friend, kind of thing. And so yeah, so it's an interesting process to go through, but I definitely think storytelling helps narrow it down more quickly and helps keep you focused.
Just a quick question about like brand identity. So how important do you think it is, brand identity? Like,
Oh, I think it's incredibly important because there's all these statistics, there's all this paperwork out there that research has said, but we're a visual people and we remember things visually more quickly and longer term if we see something that we recognize versus just words or remember hearing something. So to have a visual mark or logo just helps solidify the connection between the brand and their mission and the logo itself. So I think it's incredibly important, especially like now everything's visual. It's like we need to work as a team. It needs to be, you need to have good copywriters. You need to have good brand strategy. You need to have good visuals. You need to have a good story. You need to have good marketing to then implement the story and everything. So that's, I think, the part that sometimes gets missed is that everybody has their own special, like, kind of talent within that world. And if you don't work together, it's not going to be as strong.
so with all your experience and yeah, with all your experience, what do you think are the key elements to make a brand identity like truly impactful?
Well, I think it's storytelling and simplicity. I think simplicity is key, which is something that I love because my brain is all over the place. I have so many ideas. I'm doing so many different things often. I find it a challenge to try to make something simple. And the more simple it is, the more you'll remember it, the better it is, the more it's like, oh, I get it. And you won't be distracted by all these little things. So the storytelling part of it helps you remember why you're remembering that icon. So I do this after every logo that I build is I do a little brand story and I kind of just quickly try to diagram what's the deal with the colors? What's the deal with the fonts? What's the deal with the idea of the actual visual graphic? And I think that helps them be able to then go and explain why do they have this logo, which is then in turn talking about their mission as a company, what are their values, and like that. Then they can use that also with employees, with marketing teams to then stay consistent, because you need to be consistent so that your audience learns who you are, what you're about, and you'll develop trust and loyalty, which is what you want.
So with more about like the branding and design and stuff. So what if let me give you a quick example. So Nike, right? Like I
Mhm.
would say what like 80% of teenagers and young adults have a Nike shoe, basically.
Yep.
So what do you think it makes someone to go and buy, like, because like at the end of the day it's just a shoe, but everyone wants that specific shoe.
It's
But
it's
what do you think it
it's
makes
the,
it? Yeah.
it's the emotional connection. It's I want to be part of the group that has Nikes. I want to be the one who's just doing it. Their tagline. That's why words and visuals, they go well together. When you have both that are just awesome, people are going to remember it. I mean, my son, he's 14. He has to have Nikes. That's
Yeah.
definitely what he wants. And it has to be Nikes, not Adidas, not Puma. It has to be Nikes because he wants to be part of that group of people who have Nikes because of the emotional connection to success with athletes and being better and trying your hardest and like that. So I really think it's an emotional connection with the brand. And that comes from good strategy. And it comes from a simple, very simple icon that can be used everywhere all the time. And even like you can just hear the tagline, just do it. And exactly it's Nike. You can see the swoop on anything, it's Nike. So you don't even at that point, they've simplified it to the point where the branding is very easy. Everybody gets it.
Um so with all your experience, what's your most like how do you say the most the project that you were most proud of?
Yeah. So I find like what I really love is that with every project, there's always something new I learn or something that was a little challenging. But I always keep coming back to this one I did about a year and a half ago. It's called the Kagan Boys is the name of the company, which is also another thing when they come to you with a name already, sometimes you're like, oh, I wish I could have helped you with that name a little better, but for marketing reasons, you know, but it's the story behind this brand. It was this guy, he is a solopreneur. He's a serial entrepreneur. And I knew that right when I started talking to him, that this was not going to be his only thing that he was going to do. And I also knew he's not going to have tons of money to constantly rebrand. So I happen to know a little bit about his family. So I knew that they were Greek. I knew that his wife and one of his sons was really good in math. So I just started researching like crazy. He was selling water machines, filters for alkaline water. So the name of the machine is called Kagan, and he has 3 boys. So he wanted to represent the boys, and he wanted to represent water. So I just started doing massive research and into the Greek idea of water, Greek symbols, ancient symbols. And so I came up with the triangle. He wanted a water drop. So I decided to use the triangle upside down because the Greek symbol for water is an upside down triangle, because it's like a vessel. And so we have that story. The colors we started to use, I suggested yellow because it would be a contrast to the blue. And it also is like a caution, like, okay, pause, wait, listen to me. He wants to educate people. He's really into health and wellness. And that's what alkaline water, it's like a lower acidic water to help reduce inflammation in your body. So he really wants to educate people on these things. So we had this whole story going on with the logo that he can use. And so he uses it to sell these machines, but he also has a cycling club, which then he used to brand the cycling club. His new thing that he's starting to do is the Pizza Dad. And we're going to work on a project with him to incorporate elements of that logo into the Pizza Dad logo. So he can continue to have this logo to represent him and his family and health and wellness and who he is at his core, with all the different ventures he's going to use. And so I think that's the one that I come back to all the time that I really love, because it just has the complete story. He was a gem to work with. He had his own ideas, but he was so into learning about design, and he was so into learning about printing the design and things like that. And I just loved being able to share and help him grow, you know, as a solo business owner, in a way that is going to serve him well moving forward.
Well, it's really interesting how you transform like an image into like a story, you know, like
Yeah.
it's
I love that. It's a challenge. That's also the thing with me, is I love challenges. So those things are always challenging. There's some, like I did one recently that was just like a word mark where it's just the name of the company and fonts. And, you know, it didn't have much of a story. He didn't really want a story. It was just about, he needed a visual to represent his company, to elevate him, to target the audience he wanted. And so part of the story there for me was helping him understand that he needed to use green instead of blue. You know, it's like he wanted to target more of like environmental companies and financial companies. He wanted to work with executives at a high level. So picking a shade of green that was not like the trendy neon-y green that's out there right now, but more of a forest green that's more stable and, you know, kind of conservative and like that. So, you know, that was part of the story. So I always try to find story elements to it, even if it's just about the business. But it is really amazing when you can do that with the company itself and tell their story and their origin story.
So would you say that design needs a lot of like personality?
Yeah, ideally. I mean, you can go to anybody online these days. You can pay like $100 and get a logo, you know, and it could be a cool logo. It could be a great graphic, but it's not going to be as memorable. You know, it's not going to be something that people are going to connect with emotionally, just a random graphic that has nothing to do with the company. I see that a lot when I'm looking at companies and clients and potential clients and like that. And I'm like, yeah, that logo is fine, perfectly fine, but what does it say about the company? How is it connected to the company? And I believe if you can connect with the company through your visual right at the very beginning, they're going to remember you more, simply because you're able to tell a story. And again, connection with the story is what's going to help people remember you.
So, like especially nowadays, you can see like AI doing some like these like
Yeah.
perfect images and stuff.
Yeah.
So, what you would say is like the contrast, you know, like the difference,
Well,
like an AI image and a person image, like not a person image, but like made by a person, you know?
Well, that's one of the things that I kind of do. I do a lot of hand drawing my logos. I start off, I guess this gets into like a little bit more of my process as well. I start sketching, I sketch on paper. Usually I have a little notebook that I keep with me and I do little sketches because I think the best logos are ones that you can sketch on a napkin. If it's more complicated than that, it's probably too complicated. So like if you can take that idea and something that's like a kid could sit in school and be doodling in their notebook, that's going to be a better logo. So I usually start there and then I take it usually into the iPad and I work in Procreate. And I like when I want to add texture and color, sometimes I work in another app called Art Set. And it does really painterly. It really gets like wet paint look to it. It's the only one that has the brushes that I really find get like a wet oil paint or acrylic paint look to it. So sometimes I'll use that. And I work on the sketches then in Procreate, and then I take them to Illustrator and I define them, refine them, you know, and start working up comps for the client.
So, in your opinion, do you think AI will help branding or destroy branding?
No, you know what? I'm not afraid of technology and I'm certainly not afraid of AI. I think it will be how you decide to use it and how the communities decide to define the rules around it. It's the same that happened with photojournalism when we went digital. Everybody's like, oh my God, everybody's a photographer now. The world's over. There's going to be no more photography. There's no jobs for it. It's just not true. I mean, I can give 30 people an amazing camera and 30 people are not going to take good pictures. They're just not going to have that talent. They're not going to have the vision. You know, you might get 2 or 3 gems that were unexpected that are not, maybe wouldn't have been talented, but somehow they figured it out, but maybe they just were never exposed to it, you know, that kind of thing. I think the same is for AI. I think AI right now is really handy for idea generation. I think that putting prompts in and seeing what happens and learning the technology and learning what it can and what it can't do is just as valid. How you use it in your logos is a different thing. I did do one logo. It was for a little kid. It was a neighbor. And he wanted to start a dog walking business. And I was not charging them for this logo. And, you know, I frankly didn't want to spend tons of time on it. I knew he wanted a dog. He told me the colors he liked. So I did use AI to generate different dogs, like line drawings of dogs. And then I was able to take that into Illustrator and then quickly convert that over. And I didn't have to draw the dog by hand, which I could have done, but there was no reason to. This is like a little kid logo, you know, kind of thing. And so I think it can be helpful in that way. If I was working with a bigger client, I wouldn't do that. I would hand draw it. And that's part of like one of my things with some of my logos. You can see that like it's not 100% perfect. And that's kind of on purpose because I want that element of the human touch to it.
So you would say it's not the tool, it's the skill set of the person.
Yes. And how you implement it. You know, definitely. I mean, there's so many tools out there. I use so many different softwares that you're never going to know them all. You're never going to be an expert at them all. You have to pick a few. And then as new ones pop up, it is right now feels very overwhelming. The amount of AI generated, you know, companies and products that are coming out to try to help you. It's really overwhelming to try to figure out what you need and what you don't need. But if it's working for you, if what you're doing is working for you, then continue that way. You know, I use Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, you know, the whole Adobe suite of all their things. I have for decades. That's probably not going to change. But, you know, especially the iPad, having the program Procreate to be able to draw and sketch and paint and then be able to bring it in, game changer, 100% game changer. I love it. It's like, I can't believe it's as cheap as it is. It's just like totally amazing. So anybody who's into like drawing on an iPad or anything like that, I would highly recommend using that. And because it just saves you so much time. I mean, I could scan it in and then, draw in Illustrator, but why don't I just go ahead and have it transferred in and then just, tweak it instead of doing it from scratch when I've already drawn it once.
Yeah. So a bit more personal. So what's one piece of advice you wish you had received when you first started out?
Mm, I would say the value of networking
Mhm.
is is one of the core things, especially if you're going to go freelance or have your own company. But even if you're working for a company and you're going to be a company person, networking, because you never know who's going to be where they're going to move around. You never know what you're going to learn from different people. Especially all over the world, like their process. That's an amazing thing. Um, I think that is something that's incredibly valuable, is just connecting with people, sharing what you're doing. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid of what people think of your work. Just put it out there. The whole point is every time you do something, the next one is going to be better. So you have to start somewhere.
Do you have any designers or artists that you admire and draw inspiration from?
Yeah, I really, again, back to the simplicity. I really like what's the person's name? There, I have the book, Noma Bar. His work is very bright, colorful, and it's simplistic, but there's like allusions often to his work where it's like, oh, his use of simplicity and negative space are very cheeky and clever. So I love his work. I really love the aesthetic of Art Deco and the posters that are typically from the south of France and the French Riviera and the Italian Riviera from the 1920s and 30s, some into the 40s. They use bright colors, again, using negative space, more simplistic. I love that. Yeah, those are kind of my main inspirations.
So to finish off our interview, so do you have any final advice for teens that are in love with art and design?
Yeah, I would say be brave. Yeah, I mean, I think being brave is really hard sometimes. There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of opinions. There's always going to be opinions. There's always going to be somebody better than you, and there's always going to be somebody that's not as good as you. And you just have to keep pushing forward for yourself, and I would say do the networking, but genuine networking, connect with people to really learn what they're doing, how they're doing it, ask questions, ask a lot of questions, stay curious. Those are very helpful things as an artist and as a creator, is staying curious.
So, Patty, thank you so much for your time.
You.
I hope the teens out there that they're gonna get your word and use them for the better.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me.
Do you have any final words?
Um, yeah, I would just say again, keep creating, keep putting stuff out there. I think, and don't be afraid to just make up projects. If you're not getting a client or you're not sure where, just what do you want to do, and just make one up. There's so many portfolios that's how people got started or got their first or their second or their third client, was because of a project that somebody saw that they made up on their own that really highlighted the skills that they wanted to show. It's not all client work that's out there in your portfolio. So don't be afraid to do that.
Okay, guys. See you next time. Bye
Thank you.
bye.
Thanks.